Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Experts Unplugged Leadership Speaker Spotlights from the Tri-State Camp Conference, where I, as a fellow speaker at the conference, I'm going to highlight, and I have been highlighting some of our amazing speakers from the upcoming Tri-State Camp Conference through the American Camp Association's New York and New Jersey chapters. And this is taking place March 12th to 14th at the Atlantic City Convention Center in New Jersey. So our chats here really focus on leadership and how expertise of our speakers impacts others to think like leaders. So many of you know me. I'm Joanne Newborn. I'm CEO of Newborn Evolution, where we help smart leaders build teams that can think strategically, really problem solve effectively, and take true ownership of their outcomes. So today I'm really excited to be talking with Drew Fidler about her talk, That's Not Good for My Mental Health, setting staff up to support campers and themselves. So this really lends itself to what I'm talking about too, in terms of like team building. So this is going to be a great topic. Drew is the Senior Director of BBYO Center for Adolescent Wellness. And as the director of the Center for Adolescent Wellness, Drew helps to ensure that BBYO and other youth serving organizations are places where adolescents can thrive mentally, emotionally, and socially through institutional best practices in health and wellness. And prior to joining BBYO, Drew worked for Baltimore Child Abuse Center as a director of prevention and education. She has actually trained over 1,000 professionals. That is so many.
It's probably more at this point, I think.
Wow. To protect children and their own organization from incident. And Drew's career has focused on aiding youth serving organizations and their staff in understanding children's mental health, building environments to ensure youth thrive mentally, emotionally, and socially. She has her MSW from New York University and a BA in psychology from Skidmore College. So thank you so much for joining me today, Drew.
Thanks for having me. This is awesome.
Great. Yeah, it is. So tell me why it's important for camps to help counselors with their mental health.
So, when we think about who's showing up on camp, right, we have to account for every person that shows up, for our kids and for our staff. And if we expect our staff to be able to look after the kids, we have to care for them too. And so it's super important that we're not just considering the mental, emotional, social health of the campers and dealing with any challenges that may come our way, but that we're also prepared to really support that staff mental, emotional, social health so that that staff is well enough to care for the kids.
Yeah, it's so great. And Drew and I were chatting before the interview, and I was just saying so much of this aligns with preparing people for the corporate world. And so now I think organizations are really seeing how important this is. I mean, you're just seeing a lot more of organizations paying attention to their employees' mental health. And I love this as like this, starting place of these roots and foundations of these most really important aspects to help people, as they're growing throughout their life and career. So it's amazing.
Yeah. And I always say, I think that being a camp counselor is the best preparation for any job that you can have.
Oh,
So, yeah.
incredible. And what are some of the most common issues that you're seeing around mental health right now?
Think we're seeing, especially amongst young adults and amongst our campers, we're seeing a lot of controlling behaviors. So, disordered eating, substance use, right? Those pieces that the ability, self harming behaviors, the ability to exert control in places to make up for the places where we don't necessarily have that control.
Mm.
We're seeing, a lot of anxiety, depression. Um, we're seeing a conflagration of stress and anxiety. And I think that's part of where the title for the session comes from, right? This idea of like, that's not good for my mental health. Sort of pulling that out a little more. What does that truly mean? And is this discomfort, right? Or is it something that's truly bad for someone, for their mental health? And how do we help them to have the tools proactively to be able to deal with that. So, really looking at some of those major trends, whether that be the controlling behaviors, depression, anxiety, even suicidal thoughts.
Yeah.
I think we're seeing a lot of that show up across the spectrum and really interrupt staff's ability to care for kids, to do their jobs, and it ends up impacting how they show up or if they show up.
Yeah. Wow. There was something that you said that really stood out to me. Oh, about saying, that's not good for my mental health. And I think, at that younger age, um, we don't have the knowledge to say that's not good for my mental health, right? And it's not until later on when we're adults, and not everyone even takes control at that point to say, hey, stop. And that really comes sometimes in setting boundaries and things like that. So fascinating. What about camp um, makes mental health come to light in particular?
So I think whether day camp or overnight camp, and overnight camp especially, right? We always say a day at camp is a week in the real world.
Mm,
So much happens from the time that our kids wake up until the time they go to bed, and the same for staff. And I think it's especially challenging because, in the day camp environment, if you think about it, yeah, you leave camp, but you still live in the community that you work. So maybe you're going to the movies and running into your campers. Maybe you're going, right? You're doing something fun. You're going to grab an ice cream and there's 10 campers in there with you. So you never get the opportunity to take that break while doing that job, right? Um, I think the same exists for overnight camps, but it's even more in that you live, you work, you are doing everything under in this, insulated environment. And even if camp is your happy place, right, for so many people, you get to be outdoors. It's proactive sort of prevention pieces. There's so much good there for your mental health. And I think that it really shines a microscope because maybe we're not getting as good of sleep as we normally do.
mm.
Maybe, we're living in this environment. We don't get a break. Sometimes, even in your hour off, you can't reach those people that are, we all have those favorites in our phone or those people that you need to contact outside of the camp world. And the camp bubble becomes really real. There's no outlet, there's no leaving. You're also responsible for other people's children. That's a real massive responsibility to care for someone else, to look after someone else, to make sure that they're okay. They're eating, they're drinking, they're wearing sunscreen, they're safe. All of those things are an immense amount of responsibility to put on the shoulders of a camp counselor. And so there's a lot of different reasons that camp in particular can sort of be a pressure cooker in that way.
Yeah.
Um, Human dynamics, human relationships, right? I think the other piece of it for campers and for staff, there's a very real piece of we're in the people business. You're interacting, you're engaging with people all day, or for long periods of time, and that's it's not easy, right? Even in a pre-COVID world, that wasn't easy. In a
Yeah.
post-COVID world, where we're all still, I think, getting reused to interactions and in-person
Mhm.
interactions, and our social batteries are not as large as they used to be, right? They hold a little bit less charge.
That's
They're like,
interesting.
an iPhone that's been used for too long. It holds a little less charge than it normally does. Um,
Interesting.
yeah, so I think there's a number of reasons why camp becomes sort of can shine a light and become that microcosm of what happens in the larger world.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you said that about, I mean, that is the one big differentiator about humans is that we're social beings. And you're actually shining a light on the fact that in a post-pandemic world that we're sort of our batteries don't last as long in that space anymore. That's so intriguing. Which was a perfect segue, I think, for my next question is what are things that camps can do proactively to support the mental health of both the campers and their staff?
Yeah. So some of these are about teaching skills before I think we're in moments of stress, right? I think acknowledging that the stress is real in these environments. encouraging staff to complete a self-care worksheet before they even show up on camp, and to think about the parameters of, what is available under that normal camp environment. What is accessible? What is available? They
Yeah.
don't have the same access to things that they do outside of the camp world. So what is that? What is, you know, that self-care piece look like? And spend time on that, spend training on it. Talk about what does it look like, when you are in the red. How do you communicate that? How do you get help? What do you need? I think for, campers and for staff, making sure that, or if your camp is able to, having mental health support on staff is super important, and
Mhm.
having for staff someone identified that they can go to, and get that help and support, or seek out guidance. I think there's a lot for a lot of staff. There are major life transitions that are happening
Yeah.
while they're living in the camp world. And so, how do we help them both to process those transitions, understand, and be present in the moment where they are? I also think, there's a piece of camp that is experiencing failure, that's pushing someone's limits, that's right. And so, how do we help people to have words for their emotions? And I think this is more our younger campers than necessarily our staff. But I think regardless, when you start to feel that ick, right? That sort of like, ooh, this is sticky. Ooh, I don't know. Right? There is some amount of healthy boundary pushing that happens at camp, in a healthy way of, I'm building my resiliency, I'm growing what I can do. And so, how do we help them to live in that ick a little bit easier? Um,
Yeah.
I think those are a lot of the different tools that as camps look at, whether it's having a professional, whether it's teaching some of those coping skills in advance. Do you spend time at your camp just walking through, whether it's breathing, whether it's meditation, whether it's, rituals that people can tap into? Um, where can people find a break? Where can they get a break from maybe the noise? If they're not, sometimes the noise is overwhelming. And so, how do we, where can we go? Where can campers go? Where can staff go? How can staff communicate if they need something that isn't being given to them? And how do we help to facilitate joy? I think the one thing that camps
Mhm.
are all phenomenal at is they are places of such joy and such growth. And, how do we really help people to find the joy when maybe they're a little stuck? And so, having some of those moments, being able to honor staff, and also providing some moments of joy.
That's great. And I really love what you said about having there are so many tools available. And again, I in my mind, I'm making the parallel to the organizational world, the corporate world, because a lot of organizations right now that we're working with are creating these tools for their managers to be able to help the teams. And the thing is, if people don't know they exist, all the time and the money and the effort can go into creating those wonderful tools. But managers and for you, your staff have to be empowered to know where to go to get it, because it is so important for them to have that support that they need. So
Yeah, and empathic strain is a real thing, right? We never lose our compassion. We never lose our ability to feel for others. But what what happens, right? The cost of caring, the literal cost of being in a profession that asks you to care and look after others, is that at a certain point we do lose our ability to empathize, to see individual situations. And so, how do we help staff to take that step back, whether in the corporate world or in the camp world? Right?
yeah,
I think, how do we help them to take that step back? How do we take self-care from this thing that's like on the checklist that I feel guilty about because I didn't get to it today,
yeah,
let alone this week, this month, this year? Right? I think self-care has become that buzzword that ends up on the checklist that we all feel guilty about because we're not doing it the right way.
yeah,
And how do we make it something we can do? And how do we acknowledge that it doesn't look one way? Right? There's actually lots of different ways to access those points. There's lots of different ways to think about caring for oneself filling one's bucket so that we are then better equipped to go out and care and look after others.
Yeah, I love that. That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much. This is our little unplugged nugget with Drew, and she's going to be speaking on Thursday, March 14th at 9 a.m. So be sure to catch her. And I'm going to be speaking the day before on Wednesday, March 13th at 8:30 a.m. We're both early morning, so please bring your coffee to join us. I'm going to be talking about creating rock stars, designing collaborative high performance teams. So I think it's really important to be able to lead a high performance team that can be consistently relied upon. It's definitely a must have in order to thrive and be able to serve others in today's changing landscape. So thank you so much, Drew. And I really look forward to meeting you in March.
Thank you, Joanne. Can't wait to see you there.
Yeah, me too.